Hi, welcome back. Uh, we're looking at our second module now, and I've divided the lecture part into two parts. So this is module 2, as you can see on the screen, part 1. I thought it might be an easier way for people to take a look at what they might want to see and not have to sit in front of the screen quite so long. So let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be talking about the recruitment and selection process. And actually, recruiting is a separate animal than the actual selection. So most of what we'll deal with here is the recruitment aspect. So before we can even look at making a choice on who we want to hire, we have to go through the aspect of recruiting and making sure that we have a very strong pool of applicants so that the choice that we make will be a very good choice. So before we can even begin searching for applicants, first thing we have to do is decide what job we want to fill. So for instance, if someone leaves your workplace, you may decide to fill that position. You may decide not to fill that position. You might decide to combine it with another one or spin off part of it and move aspects of the job around and cross-train other people. So it's a chance to take a look at your future as an organization and where it's headed, and your workflow, and then also your business and market. So very important, if you can, to do this over a long period of time. So most companies of some size will actually have will keep track of trends and do this something we call forecasting to determine how fast the company is going to grow and what their HR needs might be. So the first thing we're going to do is look at planning and forecasting. And once we have that in place, then we're going to decide how we're going to recruit a pool of candidates for our whatever open position we decide that we're going to do. So let's go ahead and move forward to the first part. And you can see here I've put a definition of planning up here on the screen. An aspect of that is what we call succession planning, and that is really the process of having a second tier of folks in line, or an idea of how you would fill your executive level, or what we call your C-level jobs. So CEO, CFO, COO. So you're really important executive jobs because you don't want to be caught unaware. You might decide that you're going to train, cross-train, coach, mentor, and promote from within, or that you might want to bring in fresh blood. But you want to sort of have an idea of how you're going to do that. One of the things we do in forecasting for all the jobs is we have to take a look at not just what our company is doing, but we also have to look at our industry. How fast is it growing? Is there a chance that there'll be a slowdown? What if there's a recession? What if the economy picks up? So there are a whole wide array of systems that we need to look at and include in our forecasting and trend analysis. One thing of a point of caution to remember before we go much farther into the whole process of recruiting, selection, and then other areas of human resource management is that confidentiality of information is very critical in our field. And it's important to make sure that you remember that and that others remember it and that it's enforced. You can see also I've listed a few legislations that actually have provisions in them about who can and cannot access information. For instance, under the HIPAA law, those who have a need to know are able to access. But if you are an employee and you want to read a medical record out of curiosity, that is not considered need to know, and that would be a violation of the privacy aspect of the law. So most organizations will have internal protocols that will describe this. So, okay, we've decided what our opening is, and we think we better get going on our recruiting because the manager who needs an employee is already calling us every day to make sure that we're Johnny on the spot on this. So we're going to take a look first outside our organization. Some factors we have to look at are there qualified applicants out there? Is it a tight job market? For instance, I remember in healthcare for a while there was a shortage of nurses until more nursing programs sprouted. And so we knew that we would have to be very aggressive in how we were going to recruit. What we have to look at also, how many qualified candidates there are in our area and that sort of thing. And some of the things that might affect our ability to recruit positively and successfully have things to do with how our company is perceived. For instance, if we have a good reputation, if we're known as a company that treats its employees well, we have a better shot at securing a qualified applicant than if we're one that has a bit more of a negative reputation out in the community. So we want to take this process very carefully and make sure that we've tied it into our goals, our missions, our objectives, that we're not just recruiting somebody that we really like or that we think would be fun to work with, but that is somebody that will really fit in as we move forward with our organization. One thing we want to do is make sure that as we look at this, we want to keep in mind that we want to find a good match out there. So one of the most successful things we can do is match the right person to the right job. And I am a firm believer that there is the right job out there for most people. And that sometimes you just need a job because you need to feed your family. That's a different situation. But if you're looking for a career job, and take your time as the applicant and make sure that this is the type of organization that you're a good fit for, because that is a huge part of feeling successful and being successful in an organization. And as indicated here, if that is not the case, then employees often have less job satisfaction, and that over time can lead to more time missed from work, higher turnover, which you've probably heard is very, very costly to organizations, and decreased productivity. It sounds a bit silly, but happy people in the workplace usually are more productive, and we're beginning to see some research that shows that correlation. So in looking at this job, first we're going to try to figure out what type of person we need to hire. So the first thing we're going to do is job analysis if one doesn't exist. And that's where we're going to actually look at the job objectively and figure out what all of the tasks and duties and responsibilities are of the job, and then what needs to happen during the day, what that employee does all day long. So we can begin to write up what we need in terms of hiring somebody. From this analysis of what this person does all day long in this job, spins out the job description and the job specification. Job description, most of us are familiar with, that identifies what we're supposed to be doing all day long and what the components are of our job. The specs are really the qualifications. Often you see both on what's called a job description. Typically your job description will list the duties and responsibilities at the top, and then at the bottom it will have the qualifications that are either required or preferred, and that's how then we know what type of person that we're going to hire for the job. So now we have our job description, our job specs, our job analysis first, so we're ready to start recruiting. So recruiting is not hiring. Recruiting is finding and attracting a large enough pool of people who are interested in working for your company and working in that particular job, and who also have the qualifications to do the job. So we want to find a pool of applicants that's large enough, that's not such a broad net that we have hundreds of applicants, but not so small that we have 2 or 3. So one of the things that we're going to focus on as we look in the recruiting process and writing our job postings or ads or whatever it is however we're going to recruit, we look at something called KSAOs. KSAOs are an important aspect of the employment part of HRM. It stands for knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics or attributes. And those are the things that when we start writing our interview questions and that sort of thing, we're going to make sure that we're looking for certain skills and knowledge in an applicant. What are their abilities? Can they do it? And then the characteristics and attributes. And that often will be reflected in the culture of the organization. So in recruiting, Um, Almost 61% of job seekers find their jobs through networking. And that seems pretty incredible, but I hear this over and over again, and the data really does support this. Part of this is not necessarily even formal networking. People don't say, oh, I'm going to go out and network today, but they often hear about a job from somebody who heard about a job from somebody. I see this a lot in my on-ground classes where students will say, hey, we're looking for a new person where I work. It's a really good employer. Is anyone interested? And maybe there's no one in the classroom, but they go home and tell their spouse or significant other. They may not be interested, but they may say or pass it on to someone else. So you never know where you might hear about a good job. Another thing is often if it's a closer connection, you can actually have a recommendation or kind of an inside track. And you shouldn't poo-poo this because it is important. Many employers would rather take on an applicant that is known to somebody in their organization as opposed to a total stranger. It enhances the level of trust, and in employers' view, it reduces the level of risk in hiring a new employee somewhat. So networking is really important. Social media has really enhanced this. You'll see that people are posting on many aspects of social media, and it speeds up the process. So stay alert and stay involved in all of those if you're looking for a job. So we talked on the discussion board already so far about internal versus external recruiting. And you've given some really good ideas on pros and cons of both. But when we think of internal recruiting, most of us talk about promotions. But I just wanted to point out that it can also be lateral moves. So sometimes, let's say you want to break into the areas of either human resource management or marketing. Those are very difficult areas to get hired into from the outside. So often somebody inside an organization will make a lateral move into one of those departments and stay at that lateral level for a while in the hopes of moving up, and also learning more about the profession of either marketing or HRM. So don't just think of it as promotion, but it can be, or people who want to make a move to a location, a different location that's closer to home, closer to school, etc. Employee referrals are another source of internal recruiting because we're really recruiting from our current employees. It is, believe it or not, as you can see on your screen, the #1 way that people find a job. I know right now it doesn't seem like it because the economy has not been robust, but it will change. It has been robust in the past. And during a time like that, there are, it's a faster pace. And recruiting can be harder because there are fewer people looking for jobs. On the other hand, in a slow economy, you have a lot of people looking for jobs. And so many employers will say, oh my gosh, if I place an ad or I list it on Craigslist, I'm going to get 300 applicants for a job, which is a basic entry-level job. So what can I do? So often they will open it up to their employees. And there are many positive things about employee referrals. Employees feel like they have skin in the game when someone's hired, and it reflects on them. And so they will apply peer pressure to make sure that that person is performing at a high enough level to be acceptable to the organization. Sometimes employers will pay a finder's fee too, and often it's paid in two parts. The first part is when the person's hired. The second part is when they stay a period of time, like 3 months, 6 months, a year. So here are some advantages and disadvantages. I'm not going to go through those. If you want, you can always pause the video and read through them, but I think that we're covering them pretty well on the discussion board. External recruiting means that we're looking outside the organization, that we've determined either by looking inside that there is no one available, or for other reasons that are slightly different, we decide we want to go outside. So perhaps we want to start a new division, or we want to start introducing a new process within our organization, and we want to hire somebody in who has expertise in that. So we might definitely go outside to find somebody who can come in and help get that up and running. Another reason might be that we have a need to get fresh ideas that we're kind of stale, that we've done the same thing over and over again. And so bringing in new folks from the outside is a way of having fresh eyes on what you're doing. Here are some of the sources that we can go to. I know that when I was hiring in organizations, we often posted jobs at the community colleges in our area, particularly in the Portland metro area, because there are a lot of community colleges, and we got some pretty good applicants from that. So former employees are an excellent way. If an employee is a good one and they have to move out of area or they quit to start a family or whatever, we will often hire them back because they can hit the ground running, and if they've been a good employee, they're a known commodity. So anyway, there's a large pool of folks that we can look at and target depending on what kind of job that we're filling. So some advantages, and again, I'll let you discuss this on the discussion board, but one of the advantages is that you can increase the diversity in your organization. And I think that's something that students often bring up. It helps with the adaptability and change initiatives within organizations. And in today's world, we know that our competitors are moving quickly, which means we need to move quickly. So that can be a real advantage. Some of the disadvantages is that it takes longer than looking inside an organization. And you need to do more onboarding and acculturation with employees from the outside because they don't really know how things are done at that organization. So they need some help in understanding the culture and getting on board quickly so that they can become productive. So that's what we have today in terms of the part 1 on recruitment. And then part 2, we will cover selection. So I hope if you have any questions, you'll make sure and post those on the questions and sharing aspect of the discussion board. Thank you.